Hey, and welcome, Divine Ones. I am Jerome, a Soul Medicine Man, and coming to do another live video with you. Today, we're going to talk about three spiritual tools to help you heal rage. And these are rage or anger or deep-seated anger. These are tools that I learned that I applied for myself when I was a younger man and very angry and very violent. And um, I know a lot of you. I know a lot of people who see me now, who know this version of me, often have a hard time believing that I had a history of being angry or that I had a history of being violent. And I did. I was a very angry and often very violent young man. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about why that was and what I did to become this version of me, which most people think of as a more integrated, calm being. But I was not always that way. As a matter of fact, I was the very opposite of this. So when I say that, when I often speak out other places and I say that my life is unrecognizable, my life today is unrecognizable to the person I used to be. That's one of the pieces that I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about the health of my body or the flourishing of my life, but that my way of being is very unrecognizable to the person I used to be. So I definitely want to talk about that. But before we start, I want to share something with you that I got, a little find that I found about a week or so ago that's added to my home and is one of the things that I'm really excited about. And it's this little, this carving. It's a carving from the tribe, specifically a tribe in Zimbabwe. This tribe is well known for their ability to carve stone and to carve stones. And so this is made out of a certain type of stone. It's green. And to me, it reminds me of a medicine man. It looks like a medicine man. And so when I saw it, me being a medicine man, I had to get it. So it's a little part that I have in my office here that sits right behind me when I'm typing as a kind of a spiritual guide, if you will, to remind me to stay inside of my gift. So I wanted to share that. I was kind of excited about it. It's made out of stone. It's made. I can't remember the name of the tribe, but it's a specific tribe in Zimbabwe that specializes in carving stone. If you can see how intricate it is, but it's a medicine man. And so when I saw it, I had to get it. So yeah, let's dive in here because I want to be here along with you all today. I want to share with you a little bit about my history, and about, especially because we're in this time, the evolution of humanity right now. We're seeing a lot of violence. We're seeing a lot of unhealed anger being expressed out, whether it's in mass shootings, whether it's in a lot of fights, especially among men. Men being violent and angry. And so I want to share with you a little bit of my journey as an angry, violent young man, and what I did to heal myself. There's a saying, there by the grace of God go I. And when I see the mass shootings and I see all the anger and all of that happening out in the world, um, I'm very aware if had it been different circumstances, if my path didn't lead me down my awakening journey and I didn't have these tools, I could have easily been one of those guys, easily. But by the grace of God go I. So I want to tell you a little bit about my past. So, what a lot of people don't know who know me now and didn't know me before is that I used to be in a gang. I used to fight a lot. That I had a very short and high temper. That I was a very angry and aggressive person. And I still, I think, even remember my little gang sign. I think yeah, I do. I remember the gang sign. It was this. And I was at that point in my life, so I was really angry, and I had a lot of anger in my life, and I was just looking for a place to get it out. And there are reasons why I had anger, and so I want to share with you first of all, especially for men, Why men hold such rage? Like, what are the underlying factors, the energetic underlying factors that lead to rage? And when I see violence, and as a healer of men and as a healer of people on all different topics, one of the things that I often work, one of the things that is often at the core of a lot of people's dysfunction in their lives is unhealed anger, and it's which is turned into rage. And anytime I see violence anywhere, anytime I see just horrific, terrifying violence, I know that at the core of that, there are three core things that are happening. Is an unexpressed emotion, unexpressed anger, anger that has been allowed to fester, anger that has been suppressed and held down in some way or repressed, and so that it's coming out now in such a violent way, because again, all of our emotions have to be expressed. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But anger that comes out in that kind of way. Also, rage is when there are boundaries that we have, some things that are important to us that are being dishonored continually, habitually, that are boundaries that are being crossed, values or things that are being important to us that are not being met. We have unmet needs. So that's one of the ways. Again, so suppressed emotions is the first one. Continual, habitual, unmet needs and things that are important to you that are being dishonored and not being met. And then, also the other part of that is if there's some type of trauma or neglect, or trauma or abuse that's happening to you. And so, and then the fourth way, I'm sorry, there's four ways. And then the fourth thing is if there is some type of deep-seated self-hate and self-judgment and self-rejection. So I had a little combination of all of these things when I was a kid. So when the anger really expressed itself in my life mostly when I was a teenager and into my early 20s. And where my anger was coming from, one was because there was a part of me that I did not have permission. I didn't believe I had permission. I didn't have space. I didn't believe that there was a safe space in my life to be expressed. So I've talked a lot about that. So a part of that was my sexuality, that I didn't feel like I could express the truth of myself, and I always had to kind of suppress it. I grew up in a culture and in an environment in a family where I was made to believe that was wrong, and that was sinful, and that would make society deem me as being not enough. So I suppressed a lot of that, and not being able to be myself made me angry. The other part of that was I was a very sensitive child. Not just because I was an intuitive child, as we all are, but I was very just in touch with my emotions. Wanted to be expressive. I wanted to share things, and my family didn't really know how to handle that. They didn't know how to really be with that. So I was often shamed for my emotions, which a lot of men are, which a lot of boys are. We do that in especially American culture. We often shame boys for having any kind of emotion or expressing any type of emotion, especially when you're sad or when you're hurt or when you're afraid. And so those type of things, I didn't get space. There was no space for me to express those things externally. So I had to hold them in. I had to suppress them. I had to also repress them, which led to me being angry. Also because I couldn't really express my emotions, there were things that were important to me. There were boundaries. There were parts of my life that were important that were being dishonored. They were being dishonored. One of the things especially was when I was placed into a private school, and I experienced a ton of racism in that private school, a ton. And I didn't like the school, not just for the racism, but there were other elements that I didn't feel comfortable in that school. I didn't feel like I belonged in that place. I didn't feel a sense of connection or compassion or caring or friendship or anything like that really in that school. And my parents really, because they were trying to take me out of, the previous connections that I had where I was, in gangs and fighting a lot in school and all that. So they were trying to take me out of that where I was in public school, and they put me in private school. So when I told them I wasn't having a really good experience in private school, they really didn't pay attention because they wanted, in their minds, this was the best thing for me. This was the safe space. I was a very smart kid, so this would help me. This particular schooling would nourish my intellect, and it would keep me safe, and it would keep me out of jail and off of drugs and all that type of stuff. But what they weren't hearing was that I was deeply unhappy and that I was having a deep experience of trauma with a lot of racism. And so, me feeling like they weren't listening to me, feeling like I was unheard, and that I didn't have anybody to talk to, and nobody cared what I was saying, and I couldn't really express how the hurt that I was feeling, and I was being hurt, and that I was unhappy, and that there was no escape from that. That was constantly happening, and I couldn't really speak up for myself. Made me seriously angry. The first person I became really angry with was my mother, to the point where we had a very tumultuous relationship, to the point where I literally hated her. I didn't just dislike her, I hated her. And I hated her because, again, she was, in my mind, she was not listening to me. She was ignoring what I needed for my well being. And I felt like she was making me live a life that I didn't want to live. So that became very rageful. And again, for men, we don't often talk, for boys, we don't often give them a platform for them to speak up to what's important to them, where they're unhappy, where how they really feel, if they're sad or frustrated, or if something in their life is hurting them. There were no avenues. So I grew up in a time, especially, and I grew up in a time frame where men weren't that. I also grew up in a culture, black culture, as a predominantly, there are exceptions, but black culture predominantly at that time was not doing a really good job at helping men fully express themselves, helping black men fully express themselves, especially talk about and express and speak up for what hurts them, what's bothering them, where they're sad, where they're being unfulfilled. That's really something that we didn't offer, space for, especially for kids. Our kids our kids were to do what we told them pretty much and not really express what they want or what they needed. So given this recipe of me not being able to be myself, me being hurt in a way that I couldn't really express, to where I felt like nobody was listening to me, nobody was paying attention to me, and that I was starting to feel like my voice didn't matter. And then the other aspect of those things, where I was experiencing some racism and some trauma, not just from classmates, but from, administration, some of the teachers, some of the administrators. And so all of this kind of made the soup to where I was extremely angry, and I didn't have a space. I didn't have the tools to learn how to healthily express my anger, and I didn't have a place to do that. So what that anger turned into was rage, and it turned into violence. So, I was, at the drop of a dime, I would fight. I would fight people, even though I didn't like the conflict, but it was just, I was so angry. And so if you said something wrong to me, or you bumped into me in a certain type of way, or you looked at me in a certain way, it was fighting time for me. And that carried over into the early part of my college years, into the early parts of my 20s. Um, and I also had a very tumultuous relationship with my family because, again, to me, they were places that were dishonoring me, and they weren't listening to me, and they didn't care about what was hurting me. So, I didn't speak. I didn't really take violence out on my parents. Like, we never had anything like that. But how I would do my anger was I didn't speak to them. I wouldn't. We had a tumultuous relationship because I just didn't speak to them. I would not. I didn't want to be around them. I didn't connect with them. I didn't speak to them. And so This carried on for many years until into my early 20s, until I one day I was just like, I hate being so angry. I was so upset. And even like, if I was one of the guys in the club that, like, if you stepped on my shoe, it wasn't just, hey, I'm sorry, and like, okay, it's all right. It was, no, like, I'm gonna beat your ass. I'm going to fight. We're going to fight. You stepped on my shoe. How dare you? Because that was the only way of, violence is also the only, when you don't have a means, and you don't have the tools, and you don't feel like you have permission to really, you don't know how to express your anger and to get it out. Violence is the only way you know how to do that. So again, anger has to be expressed. All of our emotions, our emotions are energy, and energy has to be expressed. It has to move through the body in some type of way. It has to be expressed. And if we try to suppress it, it begins to be expressed in toxic ways. And there are three ways in which anger is, when we don't express anger in healthy ways, when we don't allow it to freely flow through our bodies, that it gets expressed toxically. The first way is disease and illness, chronic disease, chronic illness and disease. When we stuff anger into our bodies and we don't know how to healthily express it, we don't know how to healthily talk about it, we don't, get it out of the body, it begins to poison the body. It literally begins to poison the body. It begins to poison the health of our bodies. And so we develop high blood pressure. We develop heart disease issues. That's where a lot of heart disease issues come from. A lot of the cancers are from deep-seated rage and resentment and anger that's not been expressed. And so it's coming out. It's the anger trying to come out of your body in the best way that it knows how to, and it's trying to come out in disease. So that's the first place that suppressed anger toxically gets expressed. The other way that it gets expressed is through dysfunction in our lives. Because again, any emotion that we hold on to is added unto our vibration. It's added into the frequency that we send out into the universe. And our vibration is what literally creates our lives. It's what the universe uses to literally shape our entire lives. So when we're angry and when we have unexpressed anger, when there's anger that we have not literally released out of our bodies, it becomes a part of our vibration, and it begins to create our lives. It begins to create, it determines who comes into our lives and how they act when they come into our lives. It determines our relationships. It determines the type of work experience that we have. It determines every aspect of our lives gets filtered through this rage and this anger. So what happens is we begin to manifest more experiences that make us feel more angry, right? So there's just this toxic loop of a life that's more and more angry. So more and more people dishonor our boundaries. More and more people don't pay attention to us and don't honor us. More and more people, abuse us in some type of way. So that's like when we're holding deep-seated anger, that's the type of life we manifest, is a dysfunctional, angry life. And then the last way that anger begins to be toxically expressed is through violence, right? And so you project your anger onto yourself. And I said before, especially when there's some type of self-rejection and self-hate. And so for me, the self-hate that was happening for me was I was taught to believe that my sexuality was wrong, and that it was something embarrassing, and that it was something shameful, and that it was something to reject and to deny. So I began to hate myself. I hated myself for my sexuality. I also hated myself for my size. I was a bigger kid, and so I was teased about that. I was teased about being a bigger, being fat and being chubby and being all of that. And I was made to feel like something was wrong with me. And so I began to hate, and I internalized that. I internalized that bullying when I was a young kid, and it became anytime I wasn't thin was there. I hated myself. And so I began to project that hatred outwards. I began to project the self-hatred I had outward for other people, especially for people who were overweight, especially for people who were effeminate or gay, like who were visibly and knowingly gay, outwardly, externally gay. So those were like, that was where, especially where my violence usually went, like where I would have a lot of conflict, where I would, get angry with, or I'd get into fights with. They was particularly with that group of people. Um, it wasn't just only those people. Again, it was to anybody that was willing to do it, but especially to that group of people. That's where my anger lied a lot. So that's where when it's for men especially, when we're not necessarily, again, teaching our boys that how to express their anger, how to speak up for what hurts them, how to talk about and um, really share what is bothering them, how to express all of themselves, right? So, we put a lot of times for American boys, especially, we put them in this box where you have to like, certain things. You got to like trucks and you got to like sports and you got to do this. Don't be too artsy, right? Don't be too much into the arts, right? Because then you're feminine, then you're a sissy, then you're all of that. And so we begin to teach boys how to suppress different aspects of themselves, right? And that builds anger and that builds rage. Another aspect is when we don't teach our kids and we don't give our kids space to really talk about things, right? To really talk and to express and to really mouth out, this bothers me. This is important to me. And when we don't listen to them, when we diminish their voices as not as important as what we think they should be doing, right? When we don't listen to them, this is how a lot of times abuse, especially sexual abuse, where a lot of abuse goes untold because kids don't feel safe enough or they don't feel like they have a space. There's been a space provided for them to honestly share what happens to them, what's hurting them, what's bothering them, where they won't feel like they'll be demonized again some way or they'll be made fun of or rejected in some way. So they press that down. And then that also begins to be a kind of foundational soil that grows rage. And that rage is going to come out in one of those three ways. It's either going to come out in disease that I see a lot of times, a lot of my clients who have some type of chronic illness or disease, the underlying energetic cause of that disease is some suppressed emotion, especially some suppressed trauma, some type of abuse or traumatic event that they never really expressed, that they never really talked about, that they never felt, especially as a child, that they had to not talk about or express because they didn't feel safe enough. And that has manifested as some disease in their adulthood. Or it's some violence. A lot of times I've worked with people who tell me, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just blow up at the drop of a dime. Just with anybody that says anything, I'm just have this huge blow up, and I'm raging at my husband, or I'm raging at my wife, or I'm blowing up at work, or I'm throwing things, or I'm violent. And when we peel back the layers and we look down deep energetically, what's actually happening is you have all of these things usually stemming from childhood that you never got to say, that you never expressed about why this bothered you, or this is hurting you, or this was not okay with you, or whatever. You have all of this unexpressed, suppressed emotion that you never got to see out in the light, and it's coming out as violence. So at the very drop of a dime, when somebody crosses a boundary, when somebody does something, now instead of like, that's where we get, when people say you're never angry at what you're actually angry about, you're never angry at what you're angry about at, right? So you think you blew up at your husband, or you blew up at your spouse, or you blew up at your child because they left a fork in the sink, right? It wasn't like 10, it wasn't that you blew up at them when there was 5,000 dishes in the sink. It was when they left that one fork. And it's not that one fork that you're really angry at. What you're angry at is a long history of times where they haven't cleaned up after themselves, and you've asked them to, where where they're asking you to do more of they're asking you to clean it up when you have a whole bunch of things on your list, and they're not being considerate of all the things you have to do. They're not pulling their weight in the home or whatever. So it's not really that fork. It's all this other stuff that you never spoke up about, that you never really addressed, that was bothering you. And this was kind of like the last straw that breaks everything. And so when violence happens, it's really not just the first, violence is never the first course of action. Violence is usually the straw that broke the camel's back. It was all of this um, unexpressed emotion, all of these boundaries that were crossed that weren't honored, all of this long history of things that were chronically and habitually happening that weren't ever healthily addressed, that then now lead out to violence. So that was kind of my history. That was what kind of made me angry, and it led to violence, and it led to even illness in my body. The kidney failure and the AIDS. On my healing journey with that, one of the things I really came to understand, and what my soul showed me, was a large part of that was of all the anger that I was carrying. It was a manifestation of some of the anger that I was carrying. So I want to talk to you about how I became this version. I'm going to share with you really quick, the three tools that helped me heal that, helped me heal the anger, and helped me become the version of me that I am today, right? Where I have a healthy relationship with anger. It's not that I never get angry, but that the anger doesn't turn into rage, and that it doesn't turn into violence anymore, because I have tools to healthily express it and not hold anger in my vibration or in my being long enough to where it turns into resentment and rage and then violence. So the first tool to really begin, if you have, especially if you find yourself really angry and really rageful, and you're habitually so, right? You've been doing it for years. The first thing, one really powerful tool, and these are very simple tools. This is not a complex process. There are many other tools, by the way, but these are very simple tools that any of you can do now, that don't take a lot of money. They don't take a lot of, they're not really long, drawn out, complex processes. So the first tool is journaling. Journaling is a very powerful tool to help you express unexpressed emotions, especially anger. If there is anger that you haven't said, like if there's something, especially like I've worked with a lot of people who have parents who they held a lot of anger for their parents, or something their parents did to them or didn't do for them, how their parents treated them, or what their parents never listened to them or something. And they have a lot of anger. And even people's parents who have transitioned, who are no longer here, and they never got to get this anger out in a one-on-one conversation. This particular tool is really powerful. So you want to get a journal. And, keep it private. You don't necessarily want to share with anybody else in your life that you have this journal or where this journal is, because you want this journal to be a safe space. You want this journal to be a space where you don't have to worry about anybody else seeing it or reading it, or looking at what you're talking about and judging you for what's happening. You want to be able to express yourself unedited in this journal. And what I did was I got journals, and I began to just say exactly what was making me angry, exactly what I was angry about, exactly what what made me pissed, who I was pissed at, what I really wanted to say to them. And one of the things that helped me heal my relationship with my mother is this very thing, that I got a journal, and what I would do was I would have conversations with her in the journal, where I would say to her what I really wanted to say, right? And without saying it to her directly, like audibly, I would write in my journal what I really would like my mother to know, what I really wanted to say to her. So, I wouldn't edit it, right? So even when I was a kid, so nobody would see this. And this is back when journals came with a little key, right? So you could lock it so nobody could get in. And I would literally write out, I would curse. I would be like, I'm fucking pissed that you put me in the school and I have to go through all this goddamn racism every day, right? And I would just I would say it exactly how I felt it. I didn't try to be cute. I didn't say, I'm just kind of angry because I'm in school. No, I said exactly what I wanted to say. This is the important part of journaling. Say exactly what you want to say, how you want to say it, because that frees the energy up out of the body. It frees the energy of anger out of your body, it begins to let it flow through your body, and it gets it out of your consciousness, because that's another place that we hold anger is in the consciousness. So when it's in our thoughts and we hold it, also begins to hold in the body. So it poisons the health of the body, and it disallows us from creating anything from our consciousness that is not going to be a manifestation that is going to make us more angry. So you got to get it out. Just write in this journal exactly what you're angry about. I'm angry that you never listened to me. I'm angry that if you were abused, I'm angry that, you let that person touch me and that you didn't listen to me when I told you about it. I'm angry that, you cheated on my mother or you cheated on my father. I'm angry that, especially for men who never had fathers in their lives, this is a very powerful exercise. Write out letters to your father. Write everything out that you ever wanted to say. It might not happen in the first day, right? It may take weeks for you to write out everything that you want to say, all the anger that you may hold out. But what you'll find is if you write out all the anger and exactly how you wanted to say it, there will come a point where when you're writing, you'll realize you got it all out. It's out. You don't feel it held in your heart anymore, in your chest. It's not in your shoulders anymore. You don't feel the energy of it in your body anymore. And there is when you start to return yourself to a peace. So the process of journaling literally helped me get that anger out to where I didn't feel like I was holding on to it anymore. And I began to return myself to peace. It was a vital key to really the experience of inner peace that I have today, was the process of journaling and allowing myself to just say all that I wanted to say and all that I needed to say. The other part of this, the other tool, spiritual tool that helped me heal rage was meditation. If you've been following me, you know I'm a huge proponent of meditation. Nowadays I try to meditate twice a day for at least 15 minutes each time. So that's about 30 minutes of meditation a day. You don't have to meditate that long. You can start with a minute. You can start with 5 minutes. But meditation is a powerful spiritual tool of helping you recenter, of helping you release all of the toxic energy and come back, but not as an escape. I want to make sure people hear this, because a lot of times people can use meditation to escape having to deal with their emotions and having to face them. So meditation is not, you don't want to use meditation as an escape from being angry or to not have to deal with your anger. One of the things you want to do is it gives you a calmer place to kind of step back and to get a wider, broader view of why you're really angry. Meditation for healing anger, the power in meditation here is that it helps you get clear on why you're really angry and what you need to do to heal that anger. So as the more I began to meditate, the more I began to understand, I'm still angry at being put in that private school and dealing with all of that racism and being unhappy there. I'm still angry at what I'm really angry at is, and my meditations I became aware of, I'm angry that I didn't really get a chance to fully be my full self when I was younger. I hid myself. I hid my sexuality, and I didn't really come into myself until I was older. I'm angry about that. I'm angry that, I'm angry that I was made to feel like I was unattractive because I was bigger. So all of that stuff became clear to me the more I meditated. And then because I had that clarity, then I knew what to work on. When we don't have that clarity, we're just out there trying to do a whole bunch of stuff that's not really working for us because we're not really clear on what the source of the anger actually is. And meditation is a powerful tool that will help you get clarity on what's really at the source, what's really at the core, what's really the ground root of your anger. One of the things to do in meditation to get to that is, again, this is where you bring your journal in, to write in your journal before you sit down and meditate, why am I so angry? Why am I so angry? And then sit down in a very comfortable place and close your eyes and just focus on your breathing. Just breathe in, breathe out. You don't want to focus on trying to get the answer. You're just going to surrender that to your higher self, because that's when your higher self really speaks the loudest, is in meditation. So you're asking your higher self, why am I so angry? And then as you go into meditation, you're just going to breathe and relax. You're not trying to think about anything. You're not trying to answer the question for yourself. You just breathe and relax, and you will hear your higher self speak it out. It will either, sometimes it will speak it audibly. You'll hear something audibly. You may feel it in the body. You may get a vision of it. There are different ways in which the higher self or the soul speaks to us and communicates to us, and that's it. It'll either show you a vision, so you'll see, oh, I'm angry about that time in school, because you'll see the time in school when this happened, or you'll see the event that happened that made you angry. You may get a vision of it, or you'll get a feeling, like you just feel, you know this, you get a knowing, or you'll hear something audibly. But you do that and just breathe into that. Just don't try to work through it during that time. Just accept it, be aware of it. And then when you come out of the meditation, write it down in your journal. And then that gives you a blueprint, if you will. It gives you a plan of where you need to heal. You need to heal this element. And so you may need to heal it by speaking it out, talking to the person that was involved with that. Like if you're something your parents did, talking to your parents about, hey, I just want to tell you, when this happened with me as a kid, when you did this, or when you ignored this, or whatever, this made me angry, which leads me into the third thing, which is the third and the last step, which is the third and the last tool to healing anger. So the first one is to journal. Very powerful. Say exactly what you want to say. Say it exactly how you want to say it. Get it all out. What are you really angry about? Who are you angry at? Who are you angry at? What do you need to say? Get all of that out. Just write it out. You don't ever have to show it to anybody. You just need to get it out. Second thing is to meditate. Develop a meditation practice, a daily meditation practice. You can start with 1 minute a day. You really don't need to do more than probably 15 minutes at a time. So you don't need to go into 30 minutes or an hour unless you really want to, or you already have a practice like that. But you really only need to do about 15 minutes of meditation at a time for it to be highly effective. But to meditate, to ask the question, why am I angry? And then to go and get in tune with your higher self so that it can show you, so that it can tell you, it can communicate. Because again, the higher self sees everything. It knows everything. Your soul has the broadest perspective of everything that's happening, and it's wanting to communicate with you because it wants to help you heal. It wants you to be well, and it knows that this suppressed anger is keeping you from being well. So it will help you out if you ask it. So meditation is the second part. And then the last part, the last tool, is you've got to speak up. You've got to speak your truth in the moment that you need to and want to speak it. This was a powerful healing thing. This was probably the thing that really made the biggest transformation in my life. When I learned to just, in the moment something bothers me, to say it. To say that it bothers me, why it bothers me, and what I want instead. So the elements of speaking up and speaking your truth here, we often think speaking your truth is like just, saying what you want in life and saying, because this is really a hot button kind of thing. We're at this point where more and more people are waking up, more and more people are interested in spirituality. And so a lot of the terminology is being used in a very common sense way. And speak your truth is one of those kind of common sense phrases that's kind of become commonplace, where we hear it all the time and not really understanding what it actually means, or at least all of what it actually means. We're saying, speak your truth as far as, that if you're gay or, whatever your sexuality is, that you speak it out loud and that you own it, right? And that's definitely a part of it. Or that you speak your truth about, necessarily what you believe, that you're honest about what your beliefs are and what's important, what your values are. That's also a part of speaking your truth. But one of the highest elements of speaking your truth, which is the most healing part of speaking your truth, is speaking what you need. Like what you need for your life, or what you need in a certain experience or a certain relationship, speaking out what's important to you, and speaking out what your boundaries are. Like what's not okay with you, what's not okay with you, what somebody can't do in the experience of you, what your boundaries are. That's part of speaking your truth, and that will help you heal anger. Because a lot of times What most of us are really angry about is things that have happened that we never spoke up about. So going back to that thing about, that I talked about a while ago about the dishes in the sink. So the child or the spouse or whoever left or the roommate left that fork in the sink and you blew up. It wasn't about the fork. It was the fact that they quote unquote always do this. They always do this. They always leave dishes in the sink and you never really speak up. And you may say something sweet like, "Oh, can you do the dishes today?" And then they don't, and you don't say anything about it. That's not speaking your truth. Speaking your truth is, "Can you do the damn dishes today, please?" Because when you don't do the dishes, it makes me feel more responsibility on my part. I feel stressed. And then I also it also starts to make me feel some type of resentment to you. And I really don't want to do that. Having a clean kitchen is important to me. So and I'm willing to pull my half, and I really would like you to pull your half in this coexisting experience that we have together. So can you wash the dishes, please? And can you wash them today, tonight? Like that's speaking your truth because that's speaking exactly what you feel. It's speaking exactly what you need. And it's also being clear of what's not acceptable for you, right? Instead of when we don't do that, when we don't speak, then what happens is we have all of this rage and it starts to just build and this resentment starts to build. And then we have this rage and they leave one fork in the sink and they only leave it for like 2 minutes and we have blown a gasket. We are throwing things, we are screaming, we are cursing at them. And it never gets to that level if in the beginning, when we first see it and it bothers us a little bit, and we see it in the sink and we really want that to be washed, when you say it then it gets the anger out of your body. The energy of anger flows through the body. It's out of your body. It doesn't hold and stick into the body. So it doesn't turn into resentment. It doesn't turn into high blood pressure. It doesn't turn into cancer. And it doesn't turn into rage that later turns into violence. When you speak up, this is why anger is healthy in the beginning. Because anger is actually a healthy emotion when we learn to express it initially and when it first shows up. When we learn to express anger when we first begin to be angry, then it helps us, one, clarify what's really important to us, to the people in our lives. And it helps us set boundaries so that we can have a healthier and happier interaction in our lives with the people in our lives. But when we don't do that, when we don't speak up for what's bothering us or what's important to us or what we need or what's not okay with us, in the moment that it occurs, then it just continues and it builds, and then we continue to not say anything, and then we either blow up later or we become violent, and that's when we're wanting to hurt somebody, and that's when also it poisons our body again, because if any emotion, any single one of them that we don't allow to be expressed in the moment that it comes up and we suppressed, literally begins to become stagnant energy of the body. It restricts the flow of the divine energy through our body that we need for health, and it begins to make us sick. So that's the thing. Speaking your truth is so important. And in the moment, right? And so, it's really important so if something happens in your relationship, like your partner does something and it bothers you, in that moment, speak it. Hey, I just want you to know that thing that you're doing right there, or that thing you just did, this is how that made me feel. That bothers me. This is how it made me feel. It hurt, or it made me feel frustrated. And could you not do that again? Could you not do this, or could you do this instead? Again, speak for what you need. That's another part of this. What do you need really? So could you do this instead? Right? And there are different ways to do this to where you're not also like raging and barking when you even are communicating this. If you all are familiar with nonviolent communication, this is an excellent tool to help you begin to do that. I would highly recommend, if you want to learn how to do this particular part, to speak your truth, to really speak it in ways that are other people can hear it, and in ways that allow you to fully express what you need. Nonviolent communication is really excellent at that, because there's elements of nonviolent communication where you say what bothered you, why it bothered you, what you'd like what you would like instead, and and then asking, did the person hear you, and are they going to honor that, right? So I would highly recommend looking into the process of nonviolent communication, because it gives you kind of the elements of that. But that really helped heal me. It helped heal my whole life when I learned to express it, because then there was nothing stagnant in me anymore. Then anything that bothered me, I expressed it. I said it. I said it to who I need to say it to. It's one of the things I taught. I had a lot of conversations with my mother about, as an adult, when I started to do this healing work, was I had a lot of conversations with my mother, where we sat down and I said, I just want to talk some things out. I need to tell you some things. This is how I felt when you put me in that school and you didn't listen to the fact that I was experiencing a lot of racism. This is how I felt when, I was being made to feel like being gay was wrong. And so I couldn't really fully be myself growing up. This is how I felt. And so as I began to get it out, now I had already done the journal work, so it wasn't as charged anymore, but it was still there. And as I began to communicate to the people in my life who I needed to ask, I was hurt by, I communicated why I was hurt. I communicated what I needed instead. And all of that, the anger energy just left my body, and it left my consciousness, and my entire life transformed. And that's how you get the version of Jerome you see today, who is very centered in himself, who is much more at peace and much more easygoing, and who has a healthy relationship with anger, right? It's not that I don't ever get angry anymore. I don't get angry as much because I have a different belief system, which we'll talk about in another video. I don't get angry as much, but when anger comes up, I don't shy away from it and I don't suppress it anymore. So it doesn't poison me anymore. Also my health got a lot better. I mean, miraculously better when I started to do that, because it doesn't poison me anymore. I speak it out I speak it out right away. When somebody has made me upset, or there's something I'm upset about in an interaction or anything, I speak up about it. I say, hey, when you did this, or when you said this, or when you didn't do this, this is how that made me feel. And this is why I feel that way. And this is what I'd like instead. Can you do that? Or this is what's not, even if you can't do that, this is what's not acceptable for me. We can't be in a relationship if you're going to continue to dishonor this boundary. So those are really the three spiritual tools. Now, there are other tools. There are many more other tools, and I'll probably do some videos on those later. But I wanted to tell you the 3 tools that I used that had a dramatic effect on the transformation of my life with anger. I no longer, had the angry fight person. It takes, I don't know when the last time is I even wanted to feel like fighting somebody. Right. And fighting was literally an occurrence for me during the times when I was that angry. I fought at least once a week, at least. If I wasn't fighting with my cousins, I was fighting with people at school. I was fighting at something, or, one of the things, this is the last thing I'll close on. One of the things that I used to take my anger out on was when I played football. And I didn't take it out. This is the funny thing, because I was really good, and my coaches had come to my home to talk to my parents. That my parents told me this years afterwards, because I didn't know about this. They came to talk to my parents about how good I was and how they thought I could go to the NFL, but that I never really showed my potential in games. I only showed my potential in practices. Like when I was in practices, I was just like killing it. But when it came to games, I was never really that full on. And here's the reason why. This is what neither one of them knew. And this is just the secret to just another thing about the anger. Why I went so full out in games. I used to love knocking the crap out of my teammates. I used to love it, tackling the crap and knocking them out to where their helmets came off and running over them. I loved that. And why I loved that was because that was the only place where I could express how angry I was at them. I couldn't say it in class. I couldn't tell my parents about it. I couldn't fight. I couldn't set a boundary. But in football, I was given permission to fully use to get all that aggression out against them. And I used it against them. But when we played other teammates, when we played other teams from other schools, I had no issues with them. I wasn't angry with anybody else on that team. That team wasn't using racial slurs on me. They weren't, doing all the little privileged rich kid stuff on me. They weren't. I had no issues with them. Who I had issues with was my other teammates, and that's who I used. That's who I took all of my aggression out. Was on practice. So on practice, I was a superstar. But in the games, I was relaxed because I didn't have any issues with those guys. So, so that's really the tip here, especially I'm hoping that this, especially for the men in your life, that you either share this video with them or you talk with them about what is being shared here. But you as well, if you're not a man, if you're a woman or a female identified, this is really helpful for you as well, because I know just with working with women, a lot of women aren't either. We don't have a culture that allows them to express anger either. Or to really speak up in different ways for what bothers them. They're really conditioned for women, a lot of you all are conditioned to suppress your needs and suppress what's important to you and be quiet about what's hurting you and to care so much for other people. So you're caring for your family, you're caring for your husband to the detriment of what you actually need. And so I often see a lot of women who carry a lot of rage, and that's where their rage is, because their needs are not being met. Their boundaries are being crossed because nobody ever taught them that it was okay to express themselves and to ask for what they need and to put their needs ahead of anybody else, to meet their needs first before they try to meet the needs of everybody else. So I hope this helps you. Those 3 tools: journaling, meditation, speaking your truth. If you're angry, try those. And I guarantee you, try them. Try some element of them every day for 21 days straight. And I guarantee you will see a transformation in your life. My life today is unrecognizable to the younger me that was in a gang, to the younger me that was fighting every week, to the younger me that hated my parents, to the younger me who was just aggression and anger built up. A totally different person, totally unrecognizable version of myself today, and a version that I absolutely love and that's much healthier and much happier. So if you're experiencing anger, you can experience a healthier, happier version of yourself if you try these 3 tools. And I'd love to hear what your experience with them is. If you do them, you can just comment back on this video or send me an email and let me know how it changed you. I'd love to hear that. Until next time, I love you. Be well, heal, and flourish. Bye.